and I'll do my own closing. Like at home, I'll edit that in since we're at 2:00. So it'll sound much better. It'll be a whole long, drawn-out thing.
This was so great. Thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you.
I really appreciate
Here's your stuff, Sarah.
Thank you.
And so your shirt's in there, and Sarah threw some extra stuff. If you don't like the hats or anything like that, give them away.
I love that.
Give them to your daughter.
I love your logo. Your logo is good. Who did your logo?
I tried, and then we gave it to my wife's brother-in-law, who's a graphic designer. So.
Okay, let's see if they're...
I will hurry up and save all this stuff.
And this one goes out to all the ladies. Wow, that kind of came off weird. Bubba promised the first female guest on the What Is Up podcast would be coming soon.
Took you long enough.
And that she would be kind of a big deal. You may know her from her years as a news anchor at KWWL, or her extremely popular podcast speaking to her faith and four-letter words. Of course, we are talking about the one and only Tara Thomas-Gettman. Maybe you have seen her on Sunday mornings at Waterloo's Hope City Church, or maybe you go way back and remember her from Wheel of Fortune during College Week 1993. And yes, we dug up the video on that. We'll be sharing it in this episode.
Oh, look.
Bubba loves hearing from the experts with real-life experience when it comes to the issues. So, who better to discuss the blatant bias in media, which eventually led her to leaving the industry altogether? Without further ado, here comes our most anticipated episode to date, and the host we all just kinda tolerate, Bubba Seaman.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate all that. I love the excitement, and you should be excited. Because I'm not just going to say what is up today, because this isn't just a normal day. This is the moment you've all been waiting for. Our first female guest on the What Is Up podcast.
Woohoo.
Ladies, I'm following my wife's advice here, and I'm doing this specifically for you. I teased that the first female guest would be kind of a big deal, I guess, kind of well known in the Cedar Valley, and she could be a big deal to you for various different reasons. Yeah, I don't get worked up over many people at all, so don't go by my excitement. But she's got a very popular women's podcast that grew into a speaking tour that takes her all over Iowa and the Midwest and even beyond that, Faith and Four-Letter Words. Some of you, though, may remember her from her career in the TV news media industry. But for me, she caught my attention when she signed off for the final time at KWWL. How many years ago was that?
2013. Over 10 years.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, it went fast. And she quoted a Bible verse. I read it in Luke 12:48. I can't remember where you exactly quoted it from. It's in probably all the Gospels, but it was it really impressed me. It was, to whom much is given, much is required. And I can relate to that, because that's a big reason I do just about anything that I feel led to do, whether it's a podcast or kids ministry or teach Sunday school or preach. Seems like I've been preaching a lot lately, because to whom much is given, much is required. So I can relate to that. So after seeing that epic sign-off from KWWL, my wife, she said, well, you should invite her to come speak at Awana one night. You think she'd do it? I'm like, I don't know. So she got on Facebook and kind of badgered her a little bit, and she actually responded. Like, you never know how people are, you know? So, and since we got to meet her and she came and talked to our Awana Club, and we just thought, you know what? Now that I'm doing this that was years ago. That was right after that. So we said, maybe we should have her on the podcast. And so I met with her, and she's got a lot of ups and downs since then, and she's going to let you in behind the curtain on some of that right now. Tara Thomas, what is up?
Oh, it's such a pleasure to join you. I so appreciated when you reached out to me over a decade ago, because what God does call us to do is to connect with other Christians, to have our own fellowship and growth opportunities. And so I love that our paths have crossed once again now that you're hosting a podcast. So thank you so much for having me as your first female guest. What an honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Appropriately during Women's History Month, right? So that's nice timing.
Yeah, I planned it that way. It was exact. I was lining things up and I was like, oh, she's going to end up being like episode 15. That's going to be a big deal. And it didn't work out that way. I needed another couple weeks to stall. So we had another guest for episode 15. But, so let's go back. Let's just clear up the whole thing. Cause like we were talking before we started recording, me and anyone who saw you on the news go by you. We know you by Tara Thomas, but your husband's name is Dave Gettman. And,
Yes.
So we kind of,
So now I work as the City of Waterloo Communications Director, and I do go by my hyphenated name of Tara Thomas-Gettman, even though it's not some like women's lib thing in my real personal life. I do go by Tara Gettman, but like you and so many other people, because I was on the news here for over a decade, people just recognize Tara Thomas. So to honor those like me whose memories can slip, I put that in there. So when people hear my voice, then they go, oh yes, that's
Yeah.
right. You're the old news lady.
yeah. I mean, yeah, that's one way to say it. But yeah, that is kind of what we think. So, okay. Well, that's a good starting point. So let's just kind of start from the beginning. We don't got to go super in depth here, but just give us a glimpse of what it was like, in the early days, childhood. What was growing up like for Tara Thomas?
Well, I had a great family in Peoria, Illinois, my hometown. My parents were both administrators, initially school teachers who pursued administration. So at 28, my dad was the youngest superintendent in the state of Illinois. He and my mom both went to Illinois State, where back then that was a really popular place for educators and especially women who back in those days didn't have a lot of opportunities. You were going to be a nurse or a teacher. So my mom chose a teacher, and then she went back and got her doctorate at Illinois State and became an elementary principal. So I would say that I was definitely raised in a career-driven home, but my mom was really domestic. She was like the Martha Stewart, sewing Halloween costumes and the cooking and all the things that I never picked up. I never acquired a domestic role like my mom, unfortunately for my husband. So it was an idyllic childhood, but one that was absent a church-going rhythm. My parents did not discourage faith, but they didn't encourage it either. We only did church around holidays. It was a family get-together kind of church rhythm for me. And so I would say that I did not grow up as a Christian, but I wasn't seeking out a relationship with Christ either. It was through people that God put in my life along the way that I ultimately became a faith-driven person, not until I was in my late 20s. Okay. So it's just an interesting contrast to how I live my life today. But growing up in Illinois, I had very much a similar childhood to many Midwesterners, where we could ride our bikes everywhere and go get Slurpees at 7-Eleven and ice cream at Baskin-Robbins, and just had a wonderful time with what was then, as we know now, a different time.
The good old days.
Society, right.
Yeah.
And so no social media, no cell phones. The biggest thing you could accomplish was if you got call waiting. That was such a big deal, because then you could flip over when someone was calling in.
That was high tech. Yeah, I remember that. Oh, man. All right. So how about like higher education aspiration? Like take us through just a little bit of like high school and then into college and how you knew what you wanted to do.
So in Peoria, I actually went to a public high school that had a bad reputation. We had the highest dropout rate in the city, and we had a lot of diversity, which was actually, for me, the best training ground I could have ever had to pursue being a journalist. We had a population of less than 50% white, and it was about 60% African American in my high school. Mm-hmm. And so I have never seen more white people than when I moved to Iowa, because I grew up with a lot of diversity. And during those years, my parents, being public education people, were just like, hey, you go to the high school where you live. And our boundary fell in an area where a lot of parents, white parents, were horrified. Like, how could you send your child there? But my sister and I are grateful that our parents gave us that kind of exposure, because I feel like you can't teach diversity out of a book. And so that's what Waterloo has given my kids, is a comfort level where we can go anywhere in the world and they don't feel out of place if they're around people that look different from them. And so I appreciate what that opportunity in my formative years of teenage years gave me by growing up that way. But they just, being educators, it was a foregone conclusion. I was going to go to college. And when I was in 7th grade, I was reading what we used to do for entertainment before we had social media and cell phones. I was reading 17 magazine. And I saw there was this new startup in Atlanta. It was a 24-hour cable news network, aka CNN. And a girl there was putting a big tape in a deck, and it was like, wow, I could do that because she's involved in that world of television news. And she called herself a broadcast journalist. And that was the first time I had ever heard the term that I then was on a steady and consistent path to pursue. And so from 7th grade through high school, going on to college at Boston University, I did 6 unpaid internships, including at CNN's DC headquarters, as well as a lot of just toiling with carrying gear and cameras in small television markets from Peoria all the way to Boston. And then I ended up landing my first job right out of college in Mason City, where I was hired 2 months after Jodi Huisentruit was abducted and was actually given her desk. And so it's crazy that all these years later, a big part of our speaking tour is reviving the Jodi Huisentruit case and helping keep it alive, because it is the highest profile missing persons case still unsolved in the history of our state.
Yeah, that was right when I moved up here. That was like the summer I moved up here. I remember hearing about that because I didn't know how far away Mason City was. And my dad was like, yeah, it's like an hour north, buddy. That's kind of crazy. Man, wow. That's
another
wild
episode, Bubba.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure we could go way deep into that. But man, so after all these guests, I'm sitting here listening to you talk, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to have a lot in common with her other than we're both Christians. Like, this is going to be weird. And now you start talking about growing up around mostly black kids, and it's like, that's me. That's where I grew up, and how, just all these different things you're saying. It's like, I can totally relate. I don't feel out of place in Waterloo at all. But going to a school that had all white kids, it's like, I didn't see that till I moved to Iowa. And it's just, it's invaluable to grow up around people who are different than you, and you learn to deal with that, and you learn not to really see differences in people other than just the difference in people's character. That's it. You don't. That's kind of lost on people today, I think, but it's definitely invaluable. Okay, so I saw the sign off from KWWL, and I thought you were going into the Waterloo public school system, which you were. So tell us a little bit about that role and how you ended up where you are today, because you said you are the City of Waterloo's Director of Strategic Communications. And now you guys listen to that title. She's a Director of Strategic Communications, and she's carving out time in her day to sit down on the What Is Up podcast. So you guys better get on board. This thing isn't slowing down.
I love it. It's not as important as it might sound when you read it like that. It was so interesting that when I did become a Christian in my late 20s, I was immersed in television news, and I was still in that egotistical mindset of thinking that my life and my career and my choices were all about me. And God entered my life and completely flipped the script and put me in a headspace where I understood that the world and role of television news for me was just a vehicle that God was going to use to get me to the next stage of where he wanted me to be. And so I'm grateful for that opportunity, because it really helped me to hone my speaking skills and all of the tools that I now utilize in my unexpected future careers and the speaking tour, which is a complete mission of sharing my faith and testimony. That's what drives me to be a part of what now is a very unexpectedly successful speaking tour. So back to that moment in 2013, I was deep into television news. I had started right out of college, like I said, in 1995, and I worked for quite some time out in the Northwest in Yakima, Washington, where I met my husband. I was a news anchor there, and then when I came back to Iowa in 2002, I was coming sort of full circle back to the Midwest, but I still felt at that time that there was more sort of good than bad out of the business, and I wanted to stick it out because like I said, I had planned to do that since 7th grade. I didn't have any plan B or career path other than broadcast journalism. So in 2013, after all those years in the business, I just realized the industry had become a shell of its former self.
Yeah.
The media that I signed up for wasn't sensational and infotainment driven, but that's how the model changed because of all the competition of ultimately cable and then streaming and now competing platforms on digital devices. So no one could have predicted how quickly everything would change. But one thing was for certain for me is the more I felt God moving in my life, the deeper my faith took hold.
Okay.
There was a misalignment for me between my moral and ethical values as a Christian and what television news was churning out. There was a disconnect.
Okay.
And I knew it and I felt it. And the fact that I was a woman in an industry that isn't kind to women as they age, it all culminated in 2013 with a pastor in January at Prairie Lakes, our old church in Cedar Falls, Pastor John. He said, make 2013 a crazy faith year. And the 5 words that changed my career trajectory were, God, your plans, not mine. And I prayed that prayer the following week when I drove home from doing the 10 o'clock news, sitting in my garage. And I said, I'm not going to retire as a news anchor. I'm turning 40 this year. God, your plans, not mine. And later that week...
Oh, that's a dangerous prayer.
Oh, it is, because God doesn't, you can ask him to act on something, but you don't get to determine the timeline for when it takes shape. And so for me, instantly, the prayer was answered. I had a phone call, a voicemail on my phone at work, and I tell people, in 2013, we still used landlines. Yeah. So I actually had a blinking red light on my work phone. And I listened, and it was the voice of the then Waterloo School superintendent, and he said, Tara, I asked everybody whose opinion I value inside and outside the district who should replace the woman who's been the PR lady for the district for 16 years, and your name was on everybody's list. Yeah. And it was like, hallelujah. God's fingerprints were all over it, is what my pastor said upon consultation. And it was not easy to extricate myself from an industry that wants to quit you before you quit them. But I knew if God was behind it, there was no man that could put it asunder. And that's what led me to leave behind all I'd ever known in my adult life was television news and embark on a really fun but also challenging at times journey in the public school. So I did that role for 8 years.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's always hard for me to think of people who I know are professing Christians to say, I'm going to go work in the public school system. But isn't that what we would want? We want our influence. We want kids to see something different about teachers, about administrators and things like that. So sometimes you got to kind of put those other thoughts beside and say, yeah, we want more Christians in the public school system. I mean, my kids all went to public school. I grew up in public school. Yeah,
that is so true. And I have to say an example would be my daughter. She's a senior at Waterloo West, and she started a Bible study at the school every Wednesday morning at 7, where she has been able to connect with so many kids from so many different backgrounds, some that don't even speak English very well, but they're all united in their faith and wanting to grow it. And I love that for her, the public school has become an unexpected mission field.
Mission field, there you go. Yeah.
As it has for my husband and myself all these years. He's in his 39th year as a public school teacher.
Man, and he's done this year, right? Wow.
He's ready.
I'm happy for him.
Thank you.
Good. You guys enjoy it. Okay, so you take that job. That runs for a while, but you said you and Amanda Goodman got to spend, 1 month together before you transitioned out of KWWL? And just tell me a little bit about your and her relationship, how it started, and how it's taken you guys to these new heights that you're at now.
At the time in 2013, I was frustrated that my new job was supposed to start July 1, but this industry that still had a hold on me, literally and figuratively, said, no, your contract year isn't up until August 1st, so we're going to hold you an extra month where you're going to overlap with the person who's replacing you and basically be a lame duck. What I thought then was annoying and unnecessary turned out to be the biggest blessing, because during that 1 month overlap, I believe God had orchestrated that Amanda and I would form a bond to, at that time, despite being pitted as adversaries, become allies. And it would serve me so incredibly well in ways I could have never imagined in the ensuing decade, because how our friendship unfolded and how that led to the Faith in 4-letter words speaking tour, I just believe that God had a hand in all of it. And so now I'm grateful for that 1 month, because that's where we forged this friendship that ultimately culminated with this speaking tour. Wow.
Yeah, you think that's a terrible situation to have to sit there while the person who's replacing you is in the door already. Yeah, that's what God does. God takes those kinds of situations and he says, "No, watch this. Watch what I'm going to do."
Exactly.
So I knew of Amanda when she took over for you, but I didn't hear or think anything of her until I don't know how many years ago it was. And my wife was showing me stuff on the internet about this lady in LaPorte City is going crazy trying to make sure these kids are being protected and if there's stuff going wrong. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is this? And then I hear about you guys teaming up and doing this stuff in this ministry. And I'm like, oh, wow. So Amanda's really feisty and kind of not the person you want to tangle with. And then I'm thinking, well, Tara never struck me that way. She's, but that's exactly what God does. He can bring those kinds of people together. So the most recent thing I heard about, and I was like, I got to ask her about this, is the whole T-shirt issue. Because when I saw the T-shirt thing come up, I was like, okay, so that's got to put Tara in a hard spot because it's kind of inappropriate, but that's Amanda's raw feelings. And I saw these ladies wearing this shirt and it kind of all blew up into a big deal or whatever. And you had a really good explanation on how you deal with that. So why don't you share that with the audience?
Oh, I so appreciate you bringing that up, because what we know about our experience in the public eye is a lot of people like to, especially with women, like to sort of keep people in check and kind of have you under their thumb, so to speak. And so for Amanda, the way that she dealt with years of being treated unfairly by oftentimes chauvinistic and sexist news directors who were almost always men in that business, she is feeling somewhat vindicated because now she's able to take all the pain that she dealt with when she just had to put up with it if she wanted to keep her job and channel it into a message of female empowerment. So interestingly and kind of infamously, one particular incident with a boss that told her that she looked like a fat effing hippo and that she ruined election coverage and screamed that across the entire newsroom in front of all of her colleagues led to her being so humiliated and embarrassed that 20 years of being mistreated finally blew like a ticking time bomb. And in the moment, in her complete and utter inability to control her anger and emotion, she screamed at him the infamous phrase, "Eat a D." Mm-hmm. So that is her unexpected rallying cry that she explains has now culminated in a T-shirt, because what it represents to her is just when she finally couldn't take it anymore. And she blew up her whole TV career because she knew after she uttered those words back, she was never going to be able to move forward in a business where you don't get to challenge the men in charge. And so it's interesting that now when that was translated into merchandise on our speaking tour, I wasn't even thinking about the potential consequence until, like you said, there's that question mark of why would a Christian, somebody who's professing to be all about being, devout in her walk, how could she align herself with what one woman said was like a pornographic message? So what I always tell people is, first of all, for me, being in television, being in public education, I'm not going to be that person ever who only shows up in the safe spaces of a church or a setting where everybody has this assumed lockstep, we all have the same value system. I want to go where Jesus went. I want to go where the quote unquote sinners are, where the people who don't look like me, or the people who don't go to my church, who don't go to, the same kind of stereotypical Christian-based events are going to be. And this speaking tour has put me in front of so many people who are just going to have a drink and have a ladies' night out. I mean, basically a bar.
Yeah.
And I'm able now through the Faith in 4 Letter Words tour to share my testimony with all the people that may never be going to a church, be invited to a church, or have any intention of pursuing their Christian faith, if they even have a faith. And so what a blessing that's been for me. And Faith in 4 Letter Words in the title clearly speaks to, if there's 4 letter words involved, there may be some elements of it that push your boundaries or make you feel uncomfortable. It's the yin and yang and the dynamic that works so well between us, because some people go for the faith. Some people want to hear the tongue-in-cheek, over-the-top, 4 letter words.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I just hope and pray that in some way, shape, or form, they are touched by God, and the result of it is that He will move in their lives in a way that draws them closer to Him. And if that's what I've done for even one person, then I've succeeded in my life's calling.
Yeah, you got to get out of your comfort zone. I get that. And, for everyone who says, if they're like me and they say, well, I disagree with her choice of words. Well, in a situation like that, pent up frustration, anger, you really can't just judge somebody over
and
that.
She's very honest to say you can't tell your boss to do that and not expect fallout.
Right.
But the build up and the backstory and the explanation, once people hear it, then they really better understand. That's just a very off-color way to represent that a lot of women are sick and tired of all the things they've had to put up with. And she just finally said, I'm not going to take it anymore. Mm-hmm. And her phrase that resonates with a lot of women is, what you allow will continue.
Yeah, yeah.
And she wasn't going to allow her life to be one where she had to fit into a box because some guy thought she was too fat or too ugly.
Yeah, a man in a leadership role above her, right? Like me and my last guest, we were just talking about that. Like, what does it mean for men to lead and lead well? And it's definitely not that. And I know Amanda's married and has kids, right?
Yes.
Like, so I hope her marriage is great. I hope she understands, men, that is not the way to lead. Like we were talking in a husband-wife relationship, but even in a work relationship, my goodness, you need to sacrifice so, the woman can become what she, reach her full potential. Exactly. And that is just, that's an awful situation. So, not that she needs my approval or anything like that. I've never met her or anything, but hey, I can understand it. I got it. But now let's talk a minute about your shirt. You have a slogan. Is it in the same store?
It's all our merch table that we sell at the tour. Okay, and it's so funny because people are like, my husband and her husband, why are you saying merch? You're not like Taylor Swift. Because we go around, we go around saying we have this merch table. But here's the crazy thing. Amanda had this idea. She said, so many people were saying, you should put your phrases that you say, your lessons, your takeaways on a shirt, or do something to put it in writing. And we thought, yeah, that's kind of a great idea. Mm-hmm. So, of course, from that was born all these phrases the quips that we say on the tour. And I just thought, I love the faith over fear because that's been such a driver in my life. So I thought, let's do faith with a line and then fear. So it looks literally like faith is over fear.
Yeah.
And then when she came up with the E to D, and we have all these other variations, her E to D shirt by far and away is the number one bestseller, and it sells out at these tour dates. But what's really crazy, the hidden silver lining of all this, she said, we need to start giving back because of all that we're blessed with this successful tour. So 100% of the proceeds go to charity. 70% go to the woman who is our partner. Ivory Flamingo is her company, and her name is Ariane Martinez. She and her husband have been having fertility problems for years, and so they're trying to do a surrogacy. So 70% of the proceeds go to their journey of trying to have a child. And the remaining 30% are going back to child abuse prevention with the Family and Children's Council nonprofit that Amanda is the executive director of. So that's been really cool. And I didn't know this, but when a flamingo is pregnant, its feathers turn white.
Okay.
So she named her company Ivory Flamingo because she wants to not take for granted if she ever gets the blessing of being a mother.
Oh, I get it. Wow. Okay. Very creative there. Tell me a little bit about what you got going on in Waterloo. That was one of the first questions I asked you is other than your professional career in this speaking tour, what are you doing for the gospel? What are you doing for the kingdom right here in Waterloo? Because I know as Christians, it's not about sitting in your house and that. It's about getting out in the community and actually serving. And you had a lot to say about that, so...
Well, I love that you're giving me the opportunity to sort of toot my own horn, because so much of what we as Christians do may never be anything that we're acknowledged, affirmed, or celebrated for, and that's fine, right? Because that's not what our end game is all about. But through Hope City Church, a church that my family joined right at its inception, and they are just such a mission-driven, be the hands and feet of Jesus church, really pushing this missional community concept has been at the forefront. So my daughter, when she was 13, she's now a senior, so almost 18, but she and I and our family did a Serve the City Day, which is a community-wide, attracting hundreds of people participation event where Hope City really goes out and lives out that mission of being the hands and feet of Jesus to serve the city. We happen to be assigned to the Women's Center for Change, which is a correctional transition facility in downtown Waterloo where women coming out of incarceration have to go through steps similar to a halfway house, but it's a much higher level structured penitentiary type facility. So when we went in there that one day for our day of service, we not just did some exterior landscape cleanup, we actually had a meal with these women and talk to the residents. And then when they said, we just appreciate you guys coming in and having a conversation with us, a light bulb went off in my daughter's head. And she was like, we should do this. We could come here and make a difference for these women. And so that was born out of that was this Women's Center for Change missional community that my daughter and I have co-hosted ever since. And I'm telling you, as you know, when you go in and you hear about the struggles that people are going through, it just snaps your world into clear perspective. And you're so grateful for what God has blessed you with and your ability to have a healthy marriage and family and children. And we get more out of it probably than we give back. But every month, once a month, we go and we spend an hour and a half with these women. And so many other people have been drawn into it through me sharing it on social media. I've had places from, Jessup, Sumner, towns everywhere, donating clothes, donating toiletries, signing up to be a part of it, because you don't have to be a member of Hope City Church to be a part of our group. And it's such a life-giving experience when you go and you help people that are dealing with the kinds of things that that are just unimaginable, coming out of dysfunction and abuse, and then trying to not repeat the cycle with their children, and to see the heartbreak of some of these women, the drug addiction, the bad choices. Too much time has been lost, and they may never get their children back in their care again. And so it's a heartbreaking thing to witness, but we just show up, share our faith, share how God has worked in our lives, and just the reassurance that you're never alone. You can always turn to a relationship with Christ, and your past, whatever you've been through, that doesn't have to define your future. And
Amen.
God makes us all new in his creation, right? So that is such a fun thing for me to share, because I didn't grow up in the church. So I can tell them, I'm not perfect. And you, at any time in your life, can turn to God and he'll be there for you.
Right.
So that's so cool. And then as a side note, that's my kind of faith lane that's driven by volunteerism. But my paid job, my full-time job with the Waterloo City, insofar as being a director of strategic communication, what's cool about that is God led me to this job, because my position at that time, I had left Waterloo Schools and I was working as a executive communications director for a technology adoption company that was completely virtual. And my boss lives across the street. My ex-boss still lives across the street from me in Waterloo, but his co-founders in California, they started this company. And they started post-COVID, when time passed and people returned to the office, they started to lose their momentum and lose their contracts. And they were hitting financial struggles at the point a year ago where they were going to eliminate my position. So I went from, killing myself all these years, toiling in low-paid journalism jobs, working my way up to executive roles, getting good money, especially for, what I had taken on with my responsibilities. I was getting paid to use the skill set that I had honed all those years as a news anchor. And yet the rug was just pulled right out from under me, because God isn't going to promise you everything is going to be a bed of roses.
Yeah.
Just because we're Christians.
Yeah.
And that's what led me to Amanda saying, why don't you call Mayor Hart, our friend, who we'd been friends with for like 20 years. And I said, I hate to call and ask people for favors because I'm just not that person. And she's like, what are you talking about? Men do it all the time on the golf course. They hammer out business deals when they're out on the greens. And I'm like, you're right. We don't really have a comparable way for women to network. We don't hammer out business deals over bagels at Panera. So I called him and I said, I'm in a tough position here where I have no gainful employment as of March. I don't know what my next step is, but I'm turning to God and in desperation asking for help. And he said, yeah, let's talk. So I came into City Hall and I had a resume that I printed off. And he said, Tara, I'm really looking for a person to be in a communications role that's a very particular skill set. It's a director of strategic communication. And I opened my folder, and there atop my resume, I had written director of strategic communication because I had just completed my master's in the field at the University of Iowa the previous year. And once again, just like that moment when the previous boss had told me that my name was on everybody's list, God had that future written and planned for me long before it was ever on my radar. And since taking that job, the blessing has been, unlike television news where you ruin people's lives on a daily basis by sharing the worst choices, the worst of society, I now get to tell the good news about all the great things happening in Waterloo. So very grateful.
That is so cool. When you think about, God opens doors. Well, that doesn't mean that door is going to stay open forever. Sometimes that door is going to close, and then he's going to open up another opportunity. But at the time, it feels like, no, God, you did this for me. What is going on? It's just a lane change. It's just another phase in life. You just got to stay faithful. And I love thinking about that. When you reach out to people, like you say in your women's ministry through Hope City, some of them have never heard the stories of redemption that are in the Bible. You know what I mean? If they're in something like that where they need help and they're seeking guidance and whatever, like that could be the first time that they're actually willing to listen, to a story like Esther or any story of redemption that's in Scripture, and how the deepest, darkest situations that look like they're just unredeemable. No, nothing's impossible with God. And they need, those women need women like you who've been there, done it, that are willing to speak truth to them and just share that burden with them. So that's awesome. Hope City, keep it up. Good stuff. Okay, on every episode, we try and have a little bit of fun. Like you told us a little bit about your background, and we went a little faster than normal, but we get to a segment here where it's the getting to know you segment, where I'm just going to throw this out there and you answer, and not a ton of detail, but just quickly we're going to go through this. And this really helps the audience get to know, Tara Thomas-Gettman, the person, not just the professional, not just the person, they've seen on the speaking tour, things like that. So, and you'll get the gist of it real quick. Favorite restaurant?
Montage, which I hate to admit because that's in Cedar Falls.
Oh, wow.
And I don't even go there that much, but it's a great place.
Oh, okay. Christmas music, yes or no?
Yes, but not past Christmas Day.
Okay. No, I'm with you. I thought you were going to say past, like the old. I was like, the old stuff's the best stuff.
Yeah,
okay.
No, I love it.
Okay. One of them is, have you ever had a moment you knew God was speaking to you? But I think we already covered a lot of that. Hidden talent or something most people don't know about you?
When in college, I was on the Wheel of Fortune.
Are you kidding?
And I have the video to show you. It was fun. I made it through the audition, and I was one of my team for College Week, and I ended up spinning and going bankrupt. I lost some money and some scooters, but I won $700 and a year's supply of Klondike bars, a vacuum, and Paul Mitchell hair care products.
If we take nothing else away, I hope it's all the encouraging stuff. But like, that is a nugget of truth that like no one in my audience has ever like, oh my goodness. There's going to be people scouring YouTube right now saying, well, if she's got the video, that means the video could be out there.
It is out there. A guy found it and sent it to me not that long ago. I didn't know it was out there.
Bridget, you know what we're doing tonight? We're going to try and find that. I mean, that sounds like game show prize right there. A year's supply of Klondike bars.
From Boston, one of our nation's major centers of learning, Harvard, Boston University, Emerson, Tufts.
It's College Week on Wheel of Fortune. C-O-S-T-O-N.
From the Wang Center for the Performing Arts, the stars of our show, Pat Sajak and Vanna White.
And drama, adventure. Hi, Boston. We're back. The week two in Boston. Thank you. Cheerleaders and everything. Woo. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much, and welcome to Wheel of Fortune, our second week in Boston, and of course it's another college week, and that's always very exciting for us. Thank you very much. And I knew we put one person in that electrified seat, and it seemed to work. We have a group today is Tara Thomas from Peoria, Illinois.
Yes.
Why are they cheering like that, Tara?
Boston University.
Oh, is that what it is?
School.
BU, huh? Majoring in broadcast journalism, they say.
That's
and
right.
You are a sophomore, and what will happen after your college career is over?
Hopefully, some journalism position within the television industry.
Yeah. And what do you like to do away from class? What keeps you busy?
I like to do aerobics and weightlifting, and I like to ski a lot in the winter.
Okay, it's nice to have all three of you here. Now, good luck, relax, have a good time. We're all friends. Let's play.
Okay. Number one problem, in your opinion, that we face today?
Our breakdown of family and faith in every facet of our life.
Bam. Last guest said the exact same thing. I invited him on just to talk about that. It was amazing. That was great. Okay, number one thing we have going for us.
That there's always hope, and we as a society have so many freedoms that are afforded to us by having this democratic structure that, when executed correctly, can be so fulfilling and give us that religious freedom, in my case, to pursue my Christian faith and impart it to all the people around me that I'm able to speak to. Whereas if I were in another country, as a woman especially, I would never have the religious freedoms that we're afforded to be able to share my faith far and wide. So I do not take that for granted. I know there are Christians, as we speak, trying to share their faith and being executed for it in other countries.
Yeah, that's right. You say what you want about America, but my goodness, it is there's still
Land of the free.
No better setup where else would you rather go for multiple reasons. So let's do what we can to preserve it. Okay, this one is for Mr. Gettman. One thing you love or appreciate about Dave, your husband.
He truly embodies that selfless and sacrificial husband and father role. And again, when we committed to Christ as husband and wife, I only was willing to do so under that assumption that he and I would lead our children as Christian parents and have the family structure that's putting God at the foundation. And as the scripture tells us, if you build your marriage on that house that's built on a rock, it's what will sustain you for the decades to come. And so I'm so grateful that he is a Christian father, husband, and incredible teacher who has used education as his mission field.
Wow. Dave, when you retire, I think you're going to come speak at Awana one night.
Oh, and he would hate that. He's not a public speaker at all. He's like, you know how opposites attract? Like,
but
he would
we need men who understand that to build into other younger men.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
You have to.
And he's definitely made those personal connections over the years.
Good for you, Dave. Okay. last segment is the What Is Up segment. This is kind of, this podcast is threefold. I picked the name What Is Up because it's just two people talking, what is up? And then it's also crazy stuff that's happened over the years. What is up with that stuff? But it's also like, what is up? It's God, it's truth, it's His word. We got to look up. But this last segment really focuses on that second part, like what is up with this? And for you, I was thinking, my goodness, what is up with the bias in media? You've been in it forever. You understand it. Give us some understanding of the bias in media and how it's affecting the flow of information.
The bias of media is so ever-present and far-reaching that it trickled all the way down to my teleprompter in Waterloo, Iowa. And what I mean by that is because if you look at the way networks and information is shared, there's sort of a monopoly of ownership. And when you think of the networks, the content that is written in like New York or LA, it then is shared with all of the affiliates nationwide. So you've seen those segments that the evening entertainment programs will do, like a Jimmy Kimmel or one of those evening shows will share snippets of news anchors, a montage of everybody saying the same intro. And that's factual because what we did, we took the copy or the script or the story directly from the network, and it would just be plugged in to our evening newscast. I would at times have to edit the copy on the fly while I was anchoring because there was such a glaring bias, be it political or otherwise, in the way it was written. And so I would try to reword live as I was delivering the news, the messages that I felt were doing a disservice because we should only be the medium by which you share and direct information that's yours then as the recipient, as the viewer, to sort out and to make your own educated,
absolutely
assumptions. Unfortunately, it's hard when humans are involved to not have a bias. But what I found is there was such a hidden agenda that was starting to take hold in that industry. Like I said, I had a misalignment between my values and where that business was taking me. I did not feel comfortable knowing that they were being driven by this sensational approach to content and not that pure, just the facts.
Journalism.
Who, what, where, why, when. So back in right before I left television, so in the kind of like mid 2011, 2012-ish range, I'll never forget the tipping point for me was a really young producer was doing the show for the 10. And the producers are often young and they're the ones behind the scenes who get to decide the order of the shows and then how much you allot for weather and sports because you have to make sure you have enough time for the commercials. So when you're literally, as they call it, stacking the show and you're kind of putting all these puzzle pieces together, I said, hey, between the 5 and 6 or between the 6 and 10, I had gone on a dinner break as I often did. And one of my friends said, hey, Tim Tebow's mom is going to be speaking at Nazareth Lutheran Church in Cedar Falls. You should come. And I thought, well, how cool, because back then he was really popular. She was getting a lot of notoriety for doing public speaking on this national stage. And I show up and there were hundreds of women. It was standing room only. I mean, it was a big draw to see her. And she had such an incredible message. And I went back to the newsroom and I had a couple photos. Even that many years ago, I still had a cell phone that could take not great quality photos, but I snapped a couple shots, right? And I said, I got a couple of photos. Tim Tebow's mom was at this church. It was standing room only. She was not enthusiastic about me mentioning this. She was just so negative about it. So I thought, you know what? I'm out here. I have the mic. And so as we came out of sports, when I turned to Rick Coleman and Ron Steele to tell them about this visit, we wear these earpieces as news anchors. And so she was screaming in my ear, rap, which means shut up, go to the commercial break. And I thought, I'm out here with the mic. And I said, hey, I just have to mention Tim Tebow's mom was at this church tonight in Cedar Falls. It was a standing room only audience. It was so cool that such a high profile NFL player's mom came to the Cedar Valley. And as I'm talking the whole time, she's yelling in my ear, "We don't have time. We don't have the photos." And I just, again, in TV, you're used to people screaming at you. So you just learn to talk over it. And I ended up walking away from that. And I just thought, how sad that without even having a conversation, I knew at the heart of it what the issue was. It's because Tim Tebow's mom very vocally and unapologetically shared that she was told when she was pregnant with Tim Tebow to abort him.
Yep.
And because she was professing that message far and wide, this young producer in Waterloo, Iowa, had a problem with it and thereby could have killed that story from ever being shared, when in fact we know what constitutes news. It's what deviates from the norm. The fact that an NFL player's mom, who's so high profile, drew hundreds of women out in the Cedar Valley, that's news. That's what deviates from the norm. So it met the criteria. It met the standard. And yet I was being silenced for wanting to share that. And then shortly thereafter, it just so happened that the University of Northern Iowa had a transgender homecoming queen, and the enthusiasm and support to cover that story was tenfold in contrast to me wanting to share that Tim. And so again, is the UNI story newsworthy? Absolutely. Is there some driver that would make that more important, more worthy, or given way more news coverage than the contrast of Tim Tebow's mom? That's media bias.
That's the problem. Wow.
And I thought, I can walk away from this because this is not what journalism should be, nor is it what I signed up to do.
Yeah.
And so those little instances built up over time and made it much easier for me to say, I'm done with this.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and the whole world is wise to it now. We get it. Yeah, the monopoly at top.
It's a business, right?
Yeah.
It's a business. And that's what people blindly forget going into television, thinking they can make a difference as a journalist.
No, I've said routinely, I think journalism's like all but dead.
It
I
is
think there's,
dead.
very little.
I totally agree with you.
Man, everyone goes to the internet. If you want real facts and then determine your own opinions after that, you can't really listen to much of what you see on TV anymore. So that's tough. Wow, there's some real world experience for you folks. I always say a necktie and a degree doesn't make you an expert. I mean,
right.
Tara's got a degree, but I'm saying people who have been in it, experienced it, have something to share about it. Those are the people I want to hear from. I wouldn't want to hear from your old producers. I'm sorry, that degree doesn't make you an expert in life. Those kinds of situations make you an expert in life. So, well, Tara, I think that's about all we got time for today. I want to thank you very much for being our first female guest. I hope everyone out there enjoys it. This is what you've all been waiting for, what you've been asking for, what you've been, well, that'd be a lie if I said you've been emailing me and filling up my inbox, but they haven't been doing that. But I just knew we had to have somebody special on for our first female guest. So.
Well, I cannot thank you guys enough and your wife for thinking to include me. And I would love for anybody listening to follow us on Facebook, Faith in 4-Letter Words. That's where we share all of our fun quips, memes, and show information. Tomorrow night, I'm not sure when this airs, but we have everywhere from Reedland to Jessup. Our Jessup show is a sellout, and we actually have 20 shows scheduled for the rest of 2024 on our second year tour. So We're so excited. At last check, I've been able to share my faith with over 7,000 women.
There you go. That's where
in
it's
person.
at.
So that doesn't count all the people that hopefully listen to podcasts like yours.
Oh yeah. The small towns, you guys will sell out the small towns. I know small town moms, and they're gonna fill those places up. Trust me.
It's been great.
We're not the Wheel of Fortune, but we do have some lovely parting gifts for you as we sign off here. So you're gonna leave here today, or when we leave, you're gonna stay at your job, but you're gonna have some nice stuff to look at there and rep our podcast as well. So yeah, again, just thanks for coming on and sharing with everybody. I'm sure the audience found it super interesting and encouraging. I mean, I hope the audience found this interview with Tara Thomas-Gettman as encouraging, enlightening, maybe even eye-opening as I did. Who knew we had so much in common? I mean, that's kind of what I was worried about coming into this thing. Like, about the only thing we got in common is Jesus. So, but then as we get to talking, we both grew up in schools that were very diverse, and we didn't have any problem with that. We grew up not really in religious homes, maybe Creasters at best. We went to church on Christmas and Easter, that's it. But we both came to faith in Jesus around 20. And we both try to serve God and build up His kingdom by serving in our church and in our communities. My goodness, if that's something we need more of today, that ain't that the truth. I wish we had more time, but we don't. And I just got an idea. How about possibly a future episode with you and Amanda Goodman? Same time, I think that would be a lot of fun. So to the audience, as usual, please share this with anyone you know who would be encouraged with what Tara shared today. Help us reach more people with this kind of encouraging content, truthful content. Really what you got to do is you got to follow it. You got to subscribe, whether you're on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube. And then go to our social media. If you're big into that, I'm terrible at it, but I'm trying. Follow our Facebook and Instagram. And then comment on those platforms. That really helps it reach more people as well. You can always email me your comments, your thoughts, your opinions. Maybe your, future guests you'd like to see come on. Maybe there's a topic we haven't touched on at all and you'd love to know, what we think about it. Email me, whatisuppodcast@gmail.com. Share with everyone you know on your social media. And I think you can you can tag us in that post and then we'll see it. I think that's kind of how it works. My wife does the Facebook. Maybe buy a shirt or a hat. I think we got mugs now. I think we got stainless mugs and white mugs with the logos on there. Maybe that's your thing. I'll try and put a picture of those up. Our goal is to encourage, entertain, speak truth, and challenge everyone who listens. So if you want more of that, if you need hope, if you need change in your life, there's only one place you can go, and that is Jesus and God's Word. I'm telling you, we got to look up. That's part of the name right there. We got to look up. Looking around today, it has a lot of us asking, what is up? What is going on? And we need truth in our lives today like never before. And so let me ask you, where are you getting it? Hopefully it's not just the news media or the internet. Tara just showed us the extreme bias in media that caused a conflict with her morals. And when the rubber met the road, she chose to stand with God and follow Him. Even if that road was uncertain, she stood on it. God's Word is truth. Even if we don't believe it or want to believe it, when we get to the end of ourselves, then we can get to the beginning of God. And some people just got to get to the end of the road. We all got a sin problem, but Jesus paid the penalty for all of us. Do you want to accept that gift of forgiveness? It's yours for the taking. And you can't get it any other way. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. And I promise you, He will change your life. It might not be super easy, but it's a guarantee. There's nothing else in this world you can count on. Whatever you're going through, He will meet you there if you repent and come to the cross. Or maybe things are going just fine in your life and you think, I don't need God. My life is perfect. You're perfectly happy being your own God. Well, Jesus said there is more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Don't kid yourself. We all need a saving relationship with Jesus. None of us are good enough on our own. Myself and Tara included. If you want to know more, get a hold of me any way you want to, and I'll help you understand it. I'd actually love to hear from you, whether it's a phone call, a text, an email, it doesn't matter. That's what I live for. But don't wait too long, because we are not promised tomorrow. Anything can happen. And that's why I always sign off the same way every single episode. Lord willing, I'll see you on the next one.